My name is Emmeline Voss, and on the night of Christmas Eve, I sat at a table that wasn't meant for me. The venue was stunning. Candlelight draped across ivory linens, violins playing something soft and classical, the kind of event people would describe later as tasteful and intimate. They didn't know it was mine. I wasn't supposed to be at the front table, apparently. That much became clear when I took my seat and heard the whisper, just loud enough to sting. "Wait, isn't that the nanny? Why is she up here?" Someone gave a polite little chuckle. Another passed the bread basket like I wasn't even there. I hadn't been a nanny in over a decade, but to them, my aunt, my cousin, the soon-to-be bride, those years defined me. I was the girl who grew up quietly in someone else's house, always useful, always forgettable. Tonight, I told myself, I'd just show up, nod politely, eat a few bites of something overpriced, and disappear. But then the groom's father turned to me with a look I'd seen before. Not pity, recognition. He leaned forward slightly, his voice curious, low. "Sorry, did you say your last name was Voss? As in, the Voss who owns this venue?" I didn't need to say much. I just nodded once, and the whole table paused. They had no idea where they were sitting, or who they'd been whispering about. They always said I was good with children. Not smart, not ambitious, just good with kids. It started when I was 12 and living in my aunt's house, not by choice, but because my mother died too soon and my father left long before that. My aunt, Eleanor, took me in. Her charity was loud and public, the kind that made her look saintly to everyone else. She'd always smile and say, "Of course she's welcome. She's family," while handing me a laundry basket. I slept in the finished basement. I learned quickly how to disappear in plain sight. My cousin, Juliet, was only 2 years younger than me, but the world treated her like porcelain and me like bubble wrap. Useful, disposable, easy to blame when something popped. At 14, I was the one picking up Juliet from school, packing her lunches when my aunt was busy lunching with friends, brushing her hair before piano lessons. Everyone said how patient I was, how nurturing. "You have a gift," they'd smile. What they meant was, "This is all you'll ever be good for." When I graduated high school, nobody asked where I was applying. No one even assumed I would. Juliet got a scrapbook for her acceptances. I got a hug and a suggestion that nannying might be a good fit. I left at 19. I told my aunt I had a job offer in another city. She barely blinked, just reminded me to call if I ever needed anything. I never did. The truth? I had been accepted into a community college program for hospitality and event planning. I worked nights watching 3 kids for a surgeon's family, then interned weekends at a local wedding venue. I said yes to every shift, shadowed every planner, memorized floral contracts, and fire codes like scripture. No one expected much from me, which made it easy to outpace them. By 26, I was managing an entire wedding season for a boutique venue outside of Chicago. By 29, I made my first down payment on a property of my own, Solstice House. The name was mine. The building was mine. Every brick, every chandelier, every quiet corner I designed for guests who, like me, needed to breathe without being watched. But none of that mattered to them. Over the years, I'd see Juliet's life unfold online. Champagne brunches, corporate promotions, her face always perfectly lit and centered. She still looked like the little girl I used to pull out of tantrums, only now in heels and curated captions. Once in a while, she'd text me photos of her kids. "Look how big they are!" Like we'd ever been close. Then, out of nowhere, I got the invitation. Christmas dinner, extended family, hosted at a beautiful venue near the city, Solstice House. My own team booked it without realizing the connection. They only saw the bride's name, not mine. I thought about declining. I even drafted the email. But something stopped me. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was something colder. I showed up in black silk, neutral, timeless, invisible if I wanted to be. The staff knew who I was, of course. They offered to seat me privately, away from the noise. But I declined. I wanted the full experience, just like everyone else. When I walked into that dining room, it was like stepping back into a memory I never asked for. Juliet was radiant, of course. her hair in soft waves, her laugh loud and effortless. Her fiancé looked like a man raised on approval. Her mother, my aunt, barely glanced at me. I kissed her cheek anyway, out of habit more than affection. They sat me near the end of the table. Someone mumbled something about staff always finding their way in, then laughed like it wasn't cruel. Juliet waved vaguely in my direction. "So glad you could make it, Emmy. It's been forever." Emmy. No one calls me that anymore. I smiled and said nothing. I'd spent too many years giving answers they never really heard. What they didn't know, what none of them bothered to ask, was that every chair they were sitting on had been chosen by me. The color of the napkins, the string quartet, the wine pairing, even the floral scent diffused subtly through the room. I designed it all, and they still looked at me like I didn't belong at the adult table. Success is quieter when no one's listening for it. After leaving my aunt's house, I stopped explaining myself to people who never asked. I worked, I learned, I built. That was enough. At first, I didn't even dream of owning anything. I just wanted space. A space where I could matter, where I wasn't a burden or a background fixture. So I learned how to create that space for others. I took jobs no one else wanted. Outdoor winter weddings, last-minute bookings, brides with spreadsheets and meltdowns. I stayed late. I picked up glassware myself. I patched up flower arches at midnight with frozen fingers. And I watched. Every time a venue failed to deliver, too rigid, too careless, too impersonal, I took notes. Eventually, I got a small loan. Not from family, from a client who believed in my work ethic more than my resume. She owned 3 bakeries and said I reminded her of herself at 25. I used the loan to buy a bankrupt event space on the edge of the city, cracked tile, peeling paint, ugly carpet, but it had bones. And it had silence. The kind of silence I'd grown up in, but now I could shape it. I rebuilt it from the ground up, renovated every room, rewired every inch, and renamed it Solstice House. The name came to me one night walking through the empty halls. Winter's darkest day is the solstice, and from there, the light slowly returns. It felt like the right name for a place meant to hold beginnings. Solstice House opened quietly. No grand launch, no ribbon cutting, just one wedding after another, then anniversaries, then fundraisers. Word spread, not because I shouted, but because the service spoke for itself. I never attached my face to it. I let the company name carry the weight. Even when I opened a second venue 2 years later, then a third, my name stayed in the background. That's how I liked it. I wasn't trying to prove anything anymore. But people like Juliet, they still needed to believe I hadn't gone far. I remember one call from her, maybe 2 years ago. She was planning a baby shower and asked if I still did event stuff. I said I did. She replied, "Oh, that's cute. You always liked that kind of thing?" Cute. I told her I was booked solid and ended the call. So when I saw the name Juliet Haven on the booking list for Solstice House's holiday slot, I felt nothing, just a faint amusement. My team handled it like any other client. Contracts signed, deposits paid. I didn't add any notes, no special instructions. I didn't even tell them to move her to a different location. I wanted to see how it played out. I RSVP'd to the family dinner out of curiosity, or maybe something colder. I showed up on time, in the clothes I'd wear to meet with investors. Simple, clean, understated. I didn't want to be seen, not really. But I didn't want to hide either. The first half hour was what I expected. Air kisses, hollow compliments, people calling me Emmy, like I hadn't outgrown the name 2 decades ago. No one asked what I did. No one asked where I lived. They just assumed I was still the same girl in the background. A woman like Juliet lives in a world where people like me are meant to stay behind her, brushing her hair, adjusting her dress, setting her place cards. Even when I sat right there, in the space I owned, she still saw me as someone hired to pour the wine. I thought I could let it go. I really did. I told myself I didn't need them to see it. But as the evening wore on, and the same dismissive glances piled up like cheap compliments, something shifted. Not anger, not pride, precision. I looked around that room, every candle flicker calibrated, every bouquet balanced to match the tablecloth hues, every playlist note chosen to flow with the meal, all mine. They didn't know it, but they were sitting in the quiet center of everything they'd ignored about me. And then the groom's father arrived late. That's when it started. The groom's father arrived 20 minutes late, just as dessert plates were being cleared. He was a tall man with silver hair and the kind of stillness that comes from authority, not arrogance. He moved through the room like someone used to being observed. Juliet's fiancé, Carter, stood up quickly to greet him, the room shifting slightly as everyone adjusted to accommodate his presence. This was a man people noticed, a man people wanted approval from. I recognized him immediately. He'd been featured in a few regional business magazines: Manufacturing, Legacy Wealth, Quiet Influence. He made his way to the main table, shook a few hands, nodded toward Juliet and Carter, and then his eyes landed on me, just for a moment, nothing dramatic, but long enough to register something more than vague familiarity. Then he took his seat. Conversation returned to normal, mostly about the wedding, flowers, catering. The venue was praised. So elegant, such a good choice. While I sat 3 seats away, listening to people congratulate themselves on tastes they didn't know they'd borrowed. Juliet was glowing, or trying to. Her mother kept refilling her glass with something sparkling and expensive. Carter told a story about a coworker's proposal gone wrong. The table laughed too loudly, and someone nudged me to pass a dish, like I was part of the waitstaff. I smiled and did it. Then came the moment I should have expected. Juliet tapped her glass gently, the way brides do when they want attention without seeming needy. "I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight," she began, her voice syrupy, her smile practiced. "This dinner means the world to me and Carter. It's been such a joy planning everything with all of you." She turned toward her father-in-law. "And Mr. Wells, thank you so much for making the time. We know how busy you are." He gave a polite nod. She went on, "I also want to thank my family, especially my mom and dad, for supporting us. And of course," she paused, gesturing vaguely down the table, "Emmy, for being here." People clapped, lightly. Then she added with a soft chuckle, "I told Carter. She practically raised me, didn't she?" She looked around, eyes twinkling. "Our very own Mary Poppins." A few people laughed. My aunt gave a nostalgic sigh, like that wasn't the 100th time she'd reduced my life to a warm memory. "And who knows?" Juliet said, smiling sweetly. "Maybe Emmy will help wrangle the flower girls next weekend too, right?" More laughter. And that's when something in me clicked. Not snapped, not exploded, just clicked, like a safe unlocking from the inside. I didn't flinch. I didn't glare. I didn't touch my glass or shift in my seat. I just looked straight at her, long enough for her smile to flicker, just barely, like she caught something unfamiliar in my face. Then the groom's father cleared his throat. It wasn't loud, but it was deliberate, the kind of sound that silences a room without raising its voice. He leaned slightly forward, looked at Juliet, then at me, and said, "Excuse me. Did you say her name was Emmy?" Juliet blinked. "Well, Emmeline. But she doesn't mind. She's always been like family." He turned to me, eyebrows raised. Not unkind, but alert. "Forgive me. Emmeline Voss?" The table went still. I nodded once. "Yes." A beat. Then he smiled, slow and stunned. "Well, this is awkward," he said, leaning back in his chair. "My company tried to purchase this venue last fall. Your acquisition team shut us down." Juliet's fork dropped. He looked around the room, then gestured upward. "You all know this building is owned by Solstice Group, right?" Blank stares. "Emmeline Voss is the founder and majority shareholder." Silence. I could feel the temperature in the room shift, like someone had cracked a window and let the winter air in. My aunt was frozen. Juliet looked pale, like someone had pulled the floor out from under her. The groom's father laughed softly and raised his glass toward me. "I thought I was hosting dinner tonight. Turns out I'm just a guest." The room didn't know how to breathe, and I sat very still. Not smug, not cruel, just certain. After all, I hadn't come to be seen. But now that I was, I didn't plan to shrink. The silence that followed his toast didn't feel like shock. It felt like exposure, like someone had pulled a tablecloth off a carefully arranged display, and underneath was something no one expected to see. No one knew what to say, not even Juliet, and Juliet always had something to say. She looked at me like she was trying to do the math in real time, trying to fit the Emmeline she'd just mocked into the version now seated 3 chairs away. The one who owned the building, the staff, the scent in the air. My aunt looked down at her plate, her hand still resting on the stem of a glass she hadn't lifted since the reveal. Her posture had stiffened, her shoulders drawn up in a silent flinch. She wasn't embarrassed. No, she was calculating, trying to figure out what else I hadn't told her. The rest of the table was a scattered mess of half-sentences and unfinished sips. Some looked confused. Others glanced towards me like I might say something to smooth it over, but I didn't. I just reached for my glass of water and took a quiet sip. The groom's father was the only one still smiling, softly, respectfully. It wasn't amusement. It was acknowledgement, the kind a man gives when he recognizes not just status, but restraint. He'd seen people flaunt their power. He knew how rare it was to watch someone hold it without ever needing to raise their voice. Carter cleared his throat and muttered, "Wait, you own Solstice House?" He didn't even look at Juliet when he asked. I gave him a gentle nod. "I do." He blinked. That was all. And that's when Juliet tried to recover. "Well, I mean, we didn't know, right? You never told us." I tilted my head slightly. "No one ever asked." She opened her mouth again, something between defense and excuse. But I wasn't listening anymore. I'd heard every version of her voice before. What it sounded like when she needed something. What it sounded like when she felt superior. I didn't care what it sounded like when she felt small. The quiet was doing everything I needed it to. I folded my napkin and placed it neatly on the table. Then I stood. The room shifted again. "I'm glad the evening went well," I said softly. "If the staff can be of any help, just let them know." Juliet reached out half-heartedly, like she might touch my arm, but stopped short. Maybe she remembered the way her words had landed minutes earlier. Maybe she was finally realizing I wasn't hers to command. "Emmeline," she said, voice tight. "Wait." I met her eyes. "Why?" She blinked. I smiled, the kind you give when you've finally stepped outside someone else's story. "Enjoy your night," I said. "The building's yours until 10. Then I walked toward the exit. No one stopped me. No one called after me. And I didn't turn back to see if they were watching. I didn't need to. I knew they were. Outside, the air bit colder than I remembered. The kind of cold that didn't chase you. It steadied you. I paused just past the entrance, letting the quiet settle around me. No music, no clinking glasses, no shallow laughter, just air and breath and my own 2 feet. My car was already waiting. My assistant had thought ahead, like always. Heated seats, soft instrumental music queued up, calm and controlled. I slid inside without looking back. I didn't need to. A notification lit up on my phone. A follow request from Mr. Wells. Beneath it, a message. "Would love to connect. Your team runs an impeccable operation. Dinner was flawless." I let the message sit there for a second before locking the screen. It wasn't about the message or the praise. It was about the shift. Back in that room, they were probably still stuck, between denial and discomfort. Juliet trying to salvage face. My aunt, perhaps thinking of ways to rewrite the evening so she wouldn't have to say she missed it. Again. But none of that mattered now. I didn't build my life for applause. I didn't keep going to be seen. I built it because I knew what it felt like to be overlooked, and I'd promised myself I'd never shrink again. They saved me a seat, but I had already built my own table. Stronger, quieter, and no one could pull the chair out from under me ever again. And this time, I chose who sat beside me.